Okay, well, welcome everyone. My name is Sarah Tunge. I'm the Vice President for the National Conservation District Employees Association. Very glad to have everyone joining us this morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at in the country. NCDEA has been hosting monthly webinars featuring a variety of topics from social media, best management practices, to selling urban conservation to a rural audience. And a bunch of topics in between. One of our primary goals is to provide opportunities for conservation district employees to have access to professional development opportunities, whether those are technical related or more on the interpersonal management side. And so we're excited to be able to continue these. They are recorded. If you are unable to attend live, they are on our YouTube channel and also on our website, ncdea.us. So I'd encourage you to go there. All of the previous months' recordings are there. And if there's any resources that the speakers are willing to share, we include those as well. We also, on that page, have a link to our Lunch and Learn subscription. We have a company that helps us out with that called Convene LLC. Those are much more interpersonal related. So time management, work-life balance, dealing with difficult people. Those are some of the topics. If you register for any of those, once you're registered, you have access to a library of training. So there's probably over 100 different video training series available once you sign up for one. So I'd encourage you to check that out. That link is also on the website. And just kind of a plug for upcoming things. NCDEA is hosting a professional development opportunity on February 8th in conjunction with the NACD, National Association of Conservation Districts annual meeting. That's Saturday, February 8th from 1 to 5. We'll be hosting a series on kind of setting yourself up for success from a project standpoint and shifting mindsets to growth and opportunities. So how do you talk to your board about adding in, whether it's workforce or it's programming, services, etc. So we're still kind of figuring out the details on speakers there, but just to get that on your calendars if you're interested in coming, registration is open for NACD's annual meeting. And I think the early bird deadline is sometime in the mid to end of December. So couple plugs there for upcoming things. So today we're talking about annual planning though. So giving you a head start on 2025, looking ahead a little bit. It's crazy that we only have really 2 months-ish left in the year. And we're thrilled to have Craig Nelson with the Okanagan Conservation District. He's the executive director there. And we are very excited to have him talk to us about kind of how they do their planning, both kind of a short term, looking at the next year, but also a little bit longer term, and hopefully get some tips and tricks. So you will all notice that you are muted. You do have the opportunity to put questions in the Q&A box. I will monitor those. So Craig's going to give his presentation and then there'll be time for some question and answer at the end of that. So Craig, I will turn it over to you.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see if I do this right. Did I share the right screen?
Yep, it's looking good so far.
Okay, all right. Fingers crossed that it continues to go well here. So,
absolutely.
All right. Okay, well, good morning. As Sarah said, my name is Craig Nelson. I am the executive director here at the Okanagan Conservation District in Washington State. There will be a spelling test on the name of my district later. I'm just kidding. I'm impressed Sarah got the spelling or the pronunciation correctly. That's impressive. Those of us in the Pacific Northwest, we're so used to Native American names that we don't even think about them. I know that that's not uncommon in the rest of the U.S., but it seems to be very prevalent here. So anyways, I have been here as the manager or executive director for almost 28 years. Yes, I did start when I was 12. Thank you for asking and noticing how young I am. But in all seriousness, I've been doing this a long time. I've also helped with strategic planning, not obviously here at the Conservation District, but also with other boards that I've been involved with, including the Washington Association of District Employees, the Washington Ag Forestry Leadership Foundation, and also the North Central Washington Community Foundation, which is a nonprofit board that helps other nonprofits. So I'm bringing some of that experience into this experience. And so anyways, jumping into this. This will some of this will hopefully look pretty familiar. I'm going to keep it pretty simple and straight. In Washington, we're actually required by law to have a long range and an annual plan of work. And it's dictated by the format is dictated by our state conservation commission. They're supposed to give us kind of the process or templates. And so I'm going to kind of talk about what we do for our strategic plan, because that sets the foundation for how we go into our annual plan. But if you only have the time for an annual plan, you're not really looking for the strategic plan, the process that I would use to do just an annual plan would still be the same. It would just maybe be a little bit more compressed for the timeline, but it's really kind of the same. And we use a process that we all know and love. We use the NRCS 9 steps of planning process to do strategic planning. It might seem a little bit silly. It might seem I don't know. I don't know what it might seem, but it's a process that is familiar, and it just makes sense for us. So I'm going to kind of explain how we do that in our sense. So I love stupid, funny, silly memes. So this world needs a strategic plan, and some people are like, oh my God, I can hear you groaning even through the muted Zoom call here. Trust me, I've not always felt about strategic plans the way I do today. I hated them early on until I kind of started to see the power of strategic plans and annual plans. They're seriously very powerful. And I also, when we kind of switched over to using really the 9 steps of planning, I kind of looked at it as I would get excited about writing a farm plan for a cooperator. Why can't I get excited about writing a plan for my organization? And so kind of when I had that mental switch in my head, it made this process, I won't say fun. I'm not going to lie to you. It isn't necessarily fun, but it is empowering. It is very, and it's very helpful, and it gives us a lot of opportunities for growth and for making partnerships and developing our program the way we want to develop it. So that being said, strategic planning for the win. So I will add real quickly here that in our district, in our policies, and Sarah was kind of talking about this, those of you that kind of want to, talk to your boards about adding some things about your growth and things like that. We have a policy that if there's a grant opportunity that fits within our strategic plan, I really can talk. I've had a cup of coffee for the first time in 5 days this morning, so I might stumble a little bit here. But anyways, we have a policy that if it fits in our strategic plan, I have the authority between board meetings to go after that grant. And like sometimes you get a grant notice. There's 2 weeks to apply for that grant. You don't have time to wait for the board meeting that's in 3 weeks, or even if that board meeting's in only a week or 10 days, you're not going to have the time to wait for the board meeting and then write the grant application. Or sometimes it's another partner that wants a letter of support for a grant they're working on. If it fits within our strategic plan, I have the authority to write that letter and just send it on. So there are things that we have in our policies that if it fits within our strategic plan, it already aligns to what my authorities are as the executive director. So that's something I just kind of wanted to throw out there to everybody, to kind of be thinking of is, opportunities for kind of really helping to set a certain business model that might work for some. So, and then finally, for our annual plan of work, we're using that as a communication tool mostly, because it is it's a listing of all the things we have contracted or that we believe is going to be contracted out, our grants and projects and programs. And we're using it as a communication to everybody of this is what we're going to be doing. This is what we're working on. These are our priorities for the next 12 months. And it's a great way to use that to communicate to our partners so they know which direction we're going. And it's an opportunity to have that conversation back and forth. So, all right. So strategic planning, just real quick overview here. It sets our overall program direction. It's the beginning of that communication to the program and community of our partners and partners about our priorities, what we think are, is soil health. Is that the number one priority? Is it maybe it's forest health or water quality or, something else, whatever those things are. What's the number one priority? What's the number two priority? How far down that list do you plan on working in the next, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is? It helps you keep centered and on your track to goals. I had a supervisor a number of years ago pass away, but early on, he really kind of helped frame the process for strategic planning to me. He was like, our strategic plan is we're laying railroad tracks. This is the path that we're going to go. And this helps keep us on those tracks. Grant pops up. It doesn't fund anything that's in our plan. We can just ignore it. It's fine. But it also gives us an opportunity to communicate to others. This is where we're going. This is the method that we're going to get there. If you want to come participate, you're welcome to hook onto our train. And this is how we're going to get there. And it really helped solidify for me the importance of this strategic plan. And really from that also the annual plan, because it communicates that just for a shorter time frame. And then we also develop our partnerships and growth for our program out of our strategic planning. We've developed new partnerships with tribes, with state agencies, with federal agencies, with local nonprofits, you name it. We've really, through our strategic planning process, that is where we have probably done our biggest and greatest work in developing those partnerships that bring us more funding, more growth for our program, and more recognition for the good work we're already doing. So that's a huge thing. Come on, click over. There we go. All right. So our annual plan, it's establishing, like I said, that existing work plan. These are grants that we already have in place, or that we know that are, we're working through the final, mechanics of the grant contract. It's going to be in place. We're going to be implementing this work. Or if it's some other type of funding process or program, these are activities that we know are going to happen. It identifies our priorities for that coming year, especially if there are things that aren't quite funded, but we're hoping to get funded. We can prioritize those things and show what those things are that we really are hoping to get funded, especially as we use that tool, that plan as a tool to communicate to others, whether it's our county legislative authority, or it's a state legislature or a state agency that we're trying to get grants from, things like that. We use it to communicate major events. We have an annual conservation celebration every year. We put that in there, to showcase when we're celebrating the great success that our cooperators and partners are doing. That's in there to show that, we want to also celebrate great things that others are doing as well. It's also an opportunity for us to request support. We don't necessarily put, hey, where can you help on this? But we do share our annual plan to our partners and say, these are some of the gaps that we have. These are projects, as you can see, are priorities. Do you have any funding, or do you know where we can find funding that we can go after to get these projects done? Can you help us work towards this goal? And we've had a lot of success in getting new programs started and projects funded doing that. So, all right. So again, 9 steps. These are the 9 steps right out of the playbook from NRCS. You guys have all seen these. I'm not going to belabor them, but I am going to go into each one real quickly, and just kind of talk about how they kind of relate to that planning process. So, identify your problems. You can see in the picture right there, this is a local river system. We got erosion problems, that's a resource concern, right? We personally use Swapahi, right? It's, again, tried and true. It's easy. We kind of set our board, kind of sets the outer boundaries in our process. When we start our process for our annual or strategic planning process, our board kind of says, okay, these are the things that we think are concerns. soil erosion, forest health, water quality. Those are the kind of the major things. Water resources, available water for irrigation. We're in a very dry climate here, and we have to water our crops. So those are going to be our highest priority things, and then we go out and we do surveys to the community and we ask them for their input on those identified problems. But we ask them kind of around the SWAPAHE elements. What do they think are issues related to soil, to water, to air, plants, etc., and ask them to kind of frame them in those terms, because it just makes more sense for us, we know, going forward through our process. We do add what I call 2 special riders, if you will, to the SWAPAHE. They could fit within the human element, but we just like to draw them out. One is district administration. So we have a special set aside. There's all these various categories in our plan about soil, quality and water and all that kind of stuff. But we also have one for just district administration. It's important that we have the necessary resources to administer our district. Effective funding, that there's training for the board and for staff, so that we can better do our jobs. Also funding, a second rider, if you will, is for education and outreach. Education programs to local K-12 programs, pre-K-12, is huge for us, and it's highly sought after in our community. So we draw that out as its own standalone element in our plan, so that's be creative with that. It's, we use the SWAPAHE, if you will, however you want to say that, but we add our specific elements that work for us. So that's a real key thing, I think, in identifying the problems. We have a lot of, we're a very rural, very, very rural area of Washington. And there's not a lot of resources for kids to learn about natural resources. Even though we live amongst it, they're not learning the terminology and the technology and everything that are associated with it. We're bringing that to the classroom or bringing them outside to learn those things. So it's huge. But also, just providing the resources for us to be able to do that is critical. So, and we do that via, like I said, via surveys, community meetings, and things like that, is to identify those problems. So then next, we determine our objectives. These are kind of actionable, sometimes broad, but they're achievable goals that directly pertain to the identified problems. And one of the things that we have switched over about 5-7 years ago, the exact timeline's slipping my mind right now, but we switched over from looking at, we're going to, in the next 5 years or in the next year, we're going to have, 10 more acres or 50 more acres of riparian area planted or improved or whatever. We used to do it that way. We now talk about, we're going to have 5 more cooperators who improve their riparian systems to functioning or improved functioning, or something along those lines. We talk about changing human behavior, because what we've seen is when we focus on our goals being about human behavior changing, those practices and projects have longer lasting effects. And they also often bring us other partners and projects. Because those people that are excited about their projects talk to their neighbors, their friends, and the other people, that they run into, whether it's, at a commodity organization or, at the local Grange Hall, who knows, wherever. And they talk about their great project and they loved it. And, they got resources from the conservation district, or maybe it's from the local NRCS office or whatever. But they come in seeking, they bring somebody else in. That's a really great way for us that we found to kind of help us kind of develop that additional work. So inventory our resources, watershed plans. Most of us have them, or there's something akin to that that we have. Use our own resource farm plans. Those have data and information that we can use. Community surveys, I've talked about those. We use partner community meetings. We'll go to our commodity organizations, maybe a local farm bureau meeting, things like that. We also collect information out of the ag census. That's always a treasure trove of data. But we also even ask our partners, local, our state water quality agency, our state forestry agency, all those agencies, they all have, our local tribes, they all have data galore. Getting them to share it to you in a timely manner. So ask early, and you might have to ask often. Some of them are real stooges. You might have to pay for it. So don't talk to them anymore. No, I'm just keep begging them. Tell them that, you're just a simple conservation district, and this would be really wonderful. And usually I can get them to give up the data without having to pay for it. But usually if they make me pay for it, I move on. But that's just me. I'm a tightwad. So that's how you can tell I'm a district manager, I guess. But anyways, but there's lots of data out there, and use what you can find. It's readily available, and start looking at it and start analyzing it. One of the things that we really that I learned a long time ago is making sure that the data aligns with what you thought were the priorities. Probably 15 years ago, we had a lot of community members that were saying, noxious weeds, invasive weeds are a real problem. And yeah, they're a problem. But the data was telling us that no, it was forest health. We had an overabundance of fuel loading. Forest health was going to be a problem. Wildfires were going to be a problem. It was a growing problem, and we started prioritizing that and trying to do more and more for that. Unfortunately, we didn't do enough fast enough, and we suddenly found ourselves with massive wildfires. Then the community was like, "Oh, now it's wildfires," and guess what? So but I mean, so sometimes the perception doesn't always follow the data, and vice versa. Just try to do your best to kind of manage that, just the same as you would with a farm plan. What's the data telling you? The data, and then evaluate whether the data is accurate. Not all data is 100% accurate. Do your best to try and evaluate that. But also ask yourself if you're being objective. We have our personal opinions. We get kind of trapped in our own little silos of, I'm really big in water quality. Water quality is going to be the number 1 priority. Well, it might be, but it might not be. And sometimes those priorities do shift. So just to look at those things. And then also really looking to use GIS or other technology data as options to really kind of help understand, what our planning opportunities are. And like the photo there that you can kind of see on the screen, that's a mapping table that we have access to that allows us to show how wildfires will move across the landscape. It's a sand table. There's literally sand on the table that an image is projected on. It's based on real world data. It's like some of the coolest sci-fi stuff you've ever seen. And you can see the young lady there in the background. She's got a pointer, and she can point on the map, and it will make the fire start there. Or she can bring in bulldozers, and if they put in a fire line there, and you can start to do that. And this is in a community meeting, and you start to talk about, well, if we do some forest treatments in this area, does that mitigate the risk to our communities in this area? Or would it be better to put this, you can help prioritize things using the technology that's available to us. I mean, we wouldn't have that technology if it wasn't for somebody else that wrote a grant once upon a time and included us in it. So again, make those partnerships and utilize those to the best of your ability. So now you get to formulate your alternatives. Come up with concrete actions. These are the things that you're going to stipulate. We're going to achieve X by this date, or by this date we're going to achieve Y. Those are the types of things you're going to come up with. And you're focusing again, like I said, it can go either way. It's whatever works for you. A lot of people are very comfortable in I want to change this many acres. Other people can look at, more of the social side of things, the human behavior things. Do what is comfortable for you, and maybe it's a mix. There'll be certain things, and we still have some that are a few more of like the acres this or acres that. So so do what's comfortable. And then start looking at your evaluating your alternatives. Do you have the necessary resources? Do your alternatives have the goods to actually make those goals happen? It's maybe it's a little bit out of reach, but try and think about the things that maybe you can kind of push yourselves a little bit. but then also start looking at, are the alternatives technically feasible? I once jokingly put in a long range plan that we were gonna acquire nothing but Harley Davidsons for district vehicles, and I thought for sure the board was going to approve it. They had not read it, and at the very last second, the motion was to approve it, but remove that line. They had actually read it. It was kind of a test, but it wasn't feasible, but it was a fun little time, can these things be implemented in your time frame? Is it more of do you have to time things out to where, okay, well, for this time frame, we're going to implement this part of it, and then we'll do the rest of it later. But also be thinking about things that are maybe even beyond this current planning horizon. It's okay to put something in there it may not be feasible right now. Once upon a time, we wanted to have an educator on staff. We had that in our plan for probably 3 or 4 planning cycles before we finally got one. It takes time, and you just keep putting it out there, and eventually, if you keep working at it and keep working at it, you can make it happen. So, make your decisions. Start writing your plan, putting it on paper, getting it out in your community, and asking them, hey, did we hit the mark? Are we accurate? Are we on point? And then edit it as needed. It's a pretty standard process about making those decisions, and then getting some, doing a community feedback loop. Again, do that frequent and constant community feedback is really important. And then, get after it. Go implement the plan. This is the fun part. This is why we're doing everything we do, right? And like I said, use it as a communication tool. Share this plan widely. And not only share the plan, but then as you implement it, share those successes and talk about how we plan to do X 3 years ago or earlier this year, and we got Y done, and if I know most districts, it's going to always be equal or greater than what they planned, because that's usually what happens. We understand how to almost always deliver more than what we promise. And it's not because we're selling ourselves short. It's just because that's somehow it always works out that way. But I also like to invite other organizations. When I send that out to our partners and everything else, I always put a little tagline in there. I invite you to come be a part of our success. It sounds really cocky. I know that. And it's really probably annoying to some. I understand that. And it's not meant that way. I literally mean I want them to come and participate in this. I want them to come do their projects on the landowner next to us, or in partnership with us. Maybe they can bring something that'll just make that project that we're already planning a little bit better. So it's really just an opportunity to try and make those things just more successful. So, and this is the part that always drops off. And this is the part that honestly we fail at the most ourselves, which is evaluating the plan. But set yourself a timeline. We're going to do this every quarter or twice a year, once a year, whatever it is, and review, where we hit the marks. Don't be too critical. Sometimes plans change. You get new grant opportunities, or, some major event happens and you have to shift focus. Even when we thought that wildfire was going to be a bigger issue, we were really still focused more heavily in doing irrigation projects and things like that. And when wildfire hit, we really had to shift our program hard, and that's what happens. So we're good at that. We're very adaptable as districts, and we can do that. But also, don't forget to celebrate your success. That's one of the biggest lessons I think that I try to impart on others is we work very hard at what we do, and so do our cooperators, and we should celebrate their success. And along with that, we get to celebrate what we do to help facilitate that. So, second to last slide. I'm almost done, I promise. First, I want to talk about the stuff that's on the right. These are the links to some resources. The first one is where all of the templates are that the state of Washington offers for ours. They're really bland. Well, not bland. They're very empty templates. And then the 2 links below is to our current plans on our website. I had to make tiny URLs because the link to our webpage, it was like huge. So anyways, but that's just to my district's personal webpage where we host our current annual and strategic plan. So you can kind of see how we took those templates, modified them slightly, and then added all of our things so you can kind of see what we did. So, and then the final tips on the left, be intentional. Any quality organization, I think the leadership has to be intentional about what they're intending to do, and that's what strategic planning is all about. Be inclusive. Include those groups that maybe you haven't worked with in the past, or maybe you've tried. Keep trying. Be creative about those solutions. Find those. Kind of, some people might think they're kind of harebrained or wild ideas, but that's okay. Be bold about, this is really a problem, and stand by that and say, hey, this is something that needs to be addressed. It's okay to stand up and say that. I think a lot of times districts tend to be maybe a little bit meek because we're afraid that, we might upset somebody or whatever else. And it's not about trying to upset somebody. It's about trying to be honest about, these are the problems that need to be taken care of. And then finally, don't be afraid to take some risks. It's kind of all of those things that kind of wrap themselves into a motto that I discovered almost a year ago that really resonates with me. And it's really cheeky, but I just love it. And that is that I think particularly district managers, or executives need to be a little bit like Blackbeard, which is think like a captain and act like a pirate. You have to think strategically. Like there's a plan. We have a mission here, but sometimes you just have to kind of go after it and just kind of go get it done and make things happen. So that's just like this new little motto that I have that it just really resonated with kind of a lot of the success that I've had. It's like this really kind of captures the success I've personally had is going after it. But this is also what I do, what I plan. So this is my first grandbaby that was born earlier this year. So this is why I plan, and I'll finish by asking, what's your reason? So with that, I know I took longer than I promised. I apologize for that. I talked way too fast, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
That was fantastic. I love it. So, okay, now's your chance, everyone in the audience. Type in your questions. There's a couple I just answered real quick that we're asking for clarification on acronyms, which we all work in, which sometimes is just crazy. But if you have some, feel free to type them in. I have a couple, Craig, that I just kind of got the wheels turning. We're always talking about scalability, especially when we do these types of presentations. There are districts across the country that have no employees. There are districts that have, 20 employees. And so for those maybe districts that are just starting out, like they don't really have a solid plan, we haven't really done strategic planning. What is the one thing, like what's the starting block? Where's first base? Like, how do we get from nothing to something, and maybe not huge right off, but where would you say, here's where I would start?
Honestly, I would take that as, that proverbial trying to eat an elephant, one bite at a time, and find those smaller actionable steps, and realizing that, you're not going to go from small to even medium or large overnight. So maybe it's, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road, you're going to get to, 1 employee maybe, or something like that. But you're going to have to build some partnerships and do some things that are necessary to be able to maybe secure the funding that gets you the money to get a grant writer that will get you the grant to then secure the funding that allows you to hire the employee, maybe something like that. I think also it would maybe consider those partnerships that allow you to start working on those things. There's been a couple of districts that I know of that have done partnerships where they share employees. Maybe they don't have their own employee, but the neighboring district has an employee that's maybe part-time, a part-time office staff member or something, an admin person or finance person, something like that. And they've got enough money to be able to pay that person for 8 hours a week or something like that, and just start there. So start on a plan that shows, okay, if we can fund something like that, what are we going to use that person's time to do? What's going to get us to build that from 8 hours a week to eventually, maybe 40 hours a week, whether it's for that person or somebody else, and just go at it a little bit at a time. So
Sure.
that would be my best recommendation.
Sure. So in that same thought process, then, again, we've been talking a lot about scalability and open minds and changing mindsets. So, you have an employee who wants to start doing some of this, and we all have board members who are those, we've always done it this way, and we only do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
What's an approach to kind of show benefit, or, even, I think even having some of the resources to say, hey, other states, other districts are doing this, like, what's some advice there?
So the best advice, this happened by accident for me, but I would advise others to not to be manipulative. I wouldn't advise that. That's never a good idea with your board. But talk to your partners about maybe having them come in, like when you're doing your planning process, have them talk about how cool it would be if your district did X, whatever that is, and even if that's not something maybe that you as the employee really wants to do right now or something, and maybe there's another partner that does want you to do that one thing, then they're giving their input or whatever. The important point is that these partners are talking about having the district grow, beyond what it is that you've been doing. We have what we call rates and charges. It's our local funding. It's not an ad valorem tax, but it's a rate that we get. It's a per parcel type of payment. And when we went after it 15 years ago, when I asked my board about it, I had a board member that was just dead set against it. And it was during one of our strategic planning sessions when I was talking about it. And one of our partners who worked for our local noxious weed board was sitting there and said, wait a minute, Norm, you helped get us our assessment, which is done the exact same way ours is here at the district, conservation district. You got us ours 20 years ago. You're saying that our program over at the weed board is more important than the one at the conservation district where you are a board member. That changed his perspective. It was a light switch for him. So it's just really a matter of maybe somebody else can frame something in a way that you as an employee can't. They can broach that subject, not to say bluntly, but in a different manner than maybe an employee can't. So
Yes.
I would never advocate to set somebody up to say, hey, partner, come in and say this. Don't do that. That's a bad thing to do. But invite them to come in and be a part of the development of the program.
Yeah.
And give, please just, give your input freely. And that's all you ask. And however they go with it is how they go with it. It may work, it may not, but that would be how I would do it.
That's excellent advice. I think that's very true for a lot of not just conservation districts, but just in general. Things always sound differently coming from someone that you don't work with or talk to every day. And so that's a great way to bring those folks in. So when you bring in your partners, or how do you incorporate not just partners, but your district, as a whole, the public in your district, how do you incorporate all of those things? What types of activities do you do to get some of the information that you use to begin to develop the strategic plan?
Yeah. So to give you a quick rundown, kind of a timeline for us. So our strategic plan is a 5-year plan. We're going to, and we have to have ours submitted by next May, end of next May. We've already done our initial public survey. We started in September. And we also include things like we run our local work group. So we collect data from that. We'll do that this winter. And so we're kind of really collecting data from the community right now and talking to commodity groups. We have Cattlemen's Association. We have a horticulture association. We're talking to all those organizations. It's a little bit hard to get in and talk to a lot of them right now because I don't know, you heard there's might be an election going on. Their focus is elsewhere. And they're in the middle of harvest too. So to be fair, but getting input from all those folks that way. I showed the one slide where they had the light table thing. We had a couple of those meetings this year, so we're using that kind of data. So it is a several month process really for us to collect that data. It's not always been this way. We have done the strategic planning process in literally 3 months, back when we were much smaller. And we didn't have as many people to reach out to be perfectly honest. That's the downside of growing. I'm going to tell you right now, it's the downside of growing is more people know about you, more people honestly expect to be able to have input. So it takes more time to collect that data. So just know that going into it. So we probably will sit down in January, is my expectation, with board and staff, and go over all that data and basically put, I would say, probably 80% of the information into our strategic plan, and go through, review our mission statement, our vision, and all that kind of stuff, and some of our broad goals, and some of our initial, oh shoot, I'm drawing a blank. We'll get 80% of it done, and then reach out to some of our key partners in our CS, and some of our local partners that we work with the closest, and have them kind of do an early review. That's just a process we started using a couple of long-range plans ago and found very successful, because they're the ones that are the most keyed into some of our projects, because they are also contributing to those projects, and they'll provide us a little bit of input. The anticipation is probably early March, the board will approve us to send out the kind of final draft for public comment. We'll receive that comment, sometime in late March. We'll put a final in front of the board at the April board meeting. They'll probably approve it then. That'd be my anticipation. And then from that, I'll develop the annual plan of work that will then be approved at the May board meeting. And then we can submit both at the end of May. So that's kind of a timeline.
Nice.
But really it's just, it really does depend on the size of your program. Like you talked about, there's a lot of districts that are much smaller. You could probably do this, in a matter of a few weeks, if you're a much smaller program. And that's okay. The next time you do it, it might take a little bit longer because you might have more partners, and just understand that. And that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's good to kind of, for the folks maybe who aren't already doing one, or who have a very, basic type annual plan. If you want to look at doing it, you're already doing some of the things that you should be, that you need to collect some of that data, right? You should already be running your local work group. What a great way to engage the community and partners in some of that. So there's a lot of, you don't need some big fancy events or some fancy kind of, survey system. I know there are districts in North Dakota who send out postcards, like that's their public survey, right? So there's a lot of different ways. So don't think that it has to be, something expensive. It can be a low key, hey, we're just going to have a meeting where we invite people to come for supper or something. And, there's a lot of ways to go about it. So that's great to kind of think in that, how can we scale it? And growing is always a good problem, I think.
Well, we did, we had to redo, we wrote our community wildfire protection plan. That was the wildfire meetings. And we wanted a survey for that, just for that specifically. And our local emergency management, they have a communication tool to anybody that signed up. I mean, there's, 40,000 people in our county, and there's like 20,000 people that are signed up to get text alerts from them. They sent the link to that survey out via that system.
Yes.
So 20,000 people like that. And in less than 3 days, we had 700 responses. I'm telling you, in the last 15 years, all of our combined surveys have not had 700 responses.
Right.
So use your partners.
Yes. Use your partners.
Yeah.
And talking about it with partners, because a lot of times partners will be like, hey, we can help you do that. And they're more than happy to. You share some information back and forth, and it gets them, people are still looking at whatever, whoever that partner is. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities there to use your resources. So, so fire always gets questions. So we had a question about, as you're doing fire planning or your community wildfire protection plans, or just in your strategic plan, is there ArcGIS Pro, is there a way to demonstrate higher fire hazards for wildfire spreading, so fire growth in ArcGIS Pro?
I believe there is, but I have an employee that would know that better than I do. be honest. You know, I know you can through that system I was demonstrating, because it looks at, it has a data set for the amount of vegetation, and then of course it takes in topography.
Yep.
So those are two key factors. Higher vegetation and steeper topography is always a bad combination for aggressive fire growth. And so it will use that, and it shows a much faster, even with all other conditions being the same, it will show a much more aggressive fire growth.
Yep.
And it is based on a GIS based system. So I'm going to
Yep.
guess that it's probably within the ArcGIS framework. So
Yeah.
but I don't know that for sure, and I don't know the technicalities of it. But yeah, if yeah, you can share my email. Well, send me an email. You're
Email
gonna get
Craig.
back right now because I'm on vacation, but I will pass on that email to my staffer, and they can respond to you. So
Perfect. Any other questions from the audience before we let Craig get back to his vacation? He was nice enough to come in for an hour today for us, and
worries.
I had to twist his arm. It's gonna
Yeah, you
cost
didn't have
me,
to
I'm
twist that
sure,
hard.
at some point in the future.
I geek out on this stuff, as you can tell. So.
I do too. I love planning. I think it's an underutilized resource, quite honestly. It's something that, and it's so helpful for growth and looking ahead and where do we want to be? I mean, you could set goals that are sky's the limit, and a lot of times once they're set, it's amazing how many goals you can reach when you have them written down on paper.
Yep. Well, and it helps me. So this is also, you know, from one manager to I don't know how many others, as an employee, to be able to communicate to my board when I suggest to put things in there. This is a communication as an employee, as the leader of all the staff, you know, for things of, you know, growth for, you know, for us as an organization, as employees. This is a way for me to communicate. This is how we want to grow as professionally. And so they can understand, okay, we need to do certain things. Like I said, you know, there's things in there for training and stuff like that. You know, we were lucky enough, we had a grant that paid for this. I sent an employee, get this, to Australia for a conference.
Nice.
That was something that I would have never have imagined, even as little as 5 years ago. But we had it in our plan to be able to provide the best training for staff and to support them in their endeavors for professional membership in organizations. We put that into our plan. The employee put it into a grant. The grant accepted it. The grant paid for it. They went to Australia this summer. So
That's awesome.
yeah, you know, there's just, and like I said, you know, we had things like, you know, the educator in there, you know, had it for years. We wanted a range conservationist for years. We wanted a forester for years. Didn't happen. We finally were able to develop the program to get the funding. We have all of those. The one thing that's in our plan that we've had for years that we haven't done yet, we're fingers crossed we'll get there, is to have our own building that we own so we can kind of control our destiny that way.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it'll happen in the near future. Who knows? So
Nice. Okay, we got one last question here before we have to wrap it up. And this is related again to a smaller district that maybe doesn't have as many resources or staff. If you were to say what the key points were, like these are the top, when maybe it's the 9 planning steps, but what are the top things to include in that planning process to make sure that you're getting a well-rounded plan?
Oh, excellent question. One is communication with your community and partners early and often. I think that's really pivotal. Not only on kind of what are your priorities and what are the resource concerns and everything else, but you know, do your you know, recommended solutions, are they hitting the mark? You know, I think that's probably number one, probably the most important thing. Even if the actual things that you're planning to do aren't the best and most perfect, I think that communication is probably the most important, because that's establishing those relationships that are going to serve you well beyond the length of that actual plan. I would say then number two, I would say, yeah, analyzing that data and making sure that your actions are spot on to what the data is telling you, you know, and following that. Yeah, those are the two that. Then there's several that are really close to the others, but those two are the ones that really pop off the top of my head right now. Yeah, but yeah, making sure that you're communicating early and often, and then developing those actions that are based off of, you know, real world data the best you can. I mean, some of the data, especially on broad, you know, like countywide or watershed scale, can get a little fuzzy sometimes. I get that, but you know, do the best you can. You know where it's pointing you, yeah, if it's telling you to go left and you know your gut feeling is say to go right, you have to ask yourself, is your gut right or is the data right? And you know that's a judgment call, and only you can answer that. But sometimes you're gonna be right, sometimes you're gonna be wrong. But you know, it's the data. If you can trust the data, go to the data. So
Yeah. I would add one thing to that is to review your plans, right? Don't make this a living thing. Don't do
yeah,
it in the interest of doing it to check a box and then putting it on a shelf somewhere. And then that's kind of the end of it, but actually use it. You know, Craig was talking about using it as a communications tool, using it as a check-in tool. Like, are we moving in the direction we want to, you know, as a tool for onboarding for new employees, for new board members. There's a lot of ways you can use it. So make that part of your mission. If you're going to jump into doing this wholeheartedly, then make it a useful document for you. And what that looks like may be very different than what it looks like even for a neighboring conservation district, but make sure that you're using it.
yeah, I agree. It doesn't have to all be about natural resources. Well, the natural resource could be your human resources
Yep,
or your
absolutely.
processes. Yeah, that's a
Absolutely.
very good point. Yeah.
All right, Craig. Well, we really appreciate your
You bet.
time.
You bet.
We will post this. If you would email me your presentation, I will
Bet.
post it as well. So then if you missed it, you didn't catch it, you can get Craig's email and then those links to the examples. I love examples because I'm all about not reinventing the wheel if I don't have to.
Right.
So I appropriate or borrow or steal, whatever words you want to use, things from other districts all the time because
Right.
it's fantastic. It gives you a place to start. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And again, if you missed it, please find the replay on our website. It'll be up hopefully by the end of the week, if not the beginning of next week. And we will see you all next month. Thanks, Craig.
Thank you.